Hey everyone, this is Taehyung. I wasn't planning to share this story, but it's something that's been sitting in my chest for a long time. Maybe by saying it out loud, I can finally breathe again. It happened not too long ago, a day that should have been peaceful, even beautiful. My fiance and I were visiting my parents' house for dinner. Everything seemed perfect at first, the warm lighting, the smell of my mom's cooking, the quiet excitement in the air. It was supposed to be a simple family meal. But then, my mom asked her a question that made the entire table go silent. It wasn't loud, it wasn't cruel, but it was the kind of question that slices through the air and lands straight in your heart. Everyone froze. My father, my siblings, even my dog stopped moving for a moment. And I could feel my pulse in my throat. The question was simple, but behind it was a history of fear, tradition, and love twisted by worry. My mom looked at my fiance and said, "If Taehyung ever chooses his music over you, will you still stay?" Silence. That's all there was. I remember my fiance's face, gentle, a little confused but calm. I remember feeling this burning mix of anger and guilt. Anger because I didn't understand why my mom had to ask that, especially in front of everyone. Guilt because I knew why she did. You see, my mom has always been afraid of one thing, that the life I chose, the music I live for, would take away every other part of me. That I would forget how to love, how to live, how to be someone's home. She's seen what fame can do to people. She's seen me disappear into hotel rooms, into rehearsal studios, into stages lit so bright they almost burn. She once told me, "The world can love you for your art, but who will love you when the stage goes dark?" At that time, I laughed. But now, sitting across from my mom and the woman I want to marry, I understood the weight behind that question. I wanted to defend my fiancée. I wanted to protect her from the sharpness in my mother's tone. But something stopped me. It wasn't fear, it was realization. My mom wasn't testing her, she was testing me. Because in that moment, the question wasn't about whether my fiance would stay, it was about whether I would choose to stay, to show up, to balance both worlds without losing one for the other. For years, I thought love was about intensity, about passion, promises, and grand gestures. I used to believe that if I loved someone enough, they'd just understand me. But the truth is, love doesn't work that way. Understanding doesn't grow out of promises. It grows out of consistency, out of showing up even when you're tired, even when you're on tour, even when you're scared. After dinner, I sat outside alone. The night was quiet. I could still hear my mother's question echoing in my head. And then I started to think about how she must have felt raising a son who lived most of his life under lights and cameras. How every dream I chased pulled me further away from home. When I was younger, I used to think my mom didn't understand me. But maybe she understood me more than anyone. Maybe she knew that behind all the applause and success, there's a version of me that's still searching, still trying to find what home really means. My fiance came out to sit beside me. She didn't say much. She just took my hand and said, "You don't have to choose, just learn how to hold both." And somehow, that was the answer my mom needed to hear, even if she wasn't there to hear it. That night, I realized something I'd been avoiding for a long time. I was afraid too, afraid that I'd never be able to give love the same focus I gave my art, afraid that my music would always come first and that someday the people I love would get tired of waiting for me to come back. But maybe that's what love is supposed to do, confront the parts of you that you keep hidden behind your work. I thought back to my brothers, the members who've been through everything with me. Namjoon, who always reminded me that love and purpose don't compete, they complete each other. Yoongi, who said once, music will never betray you, but don't let that make you forget to trust people. Hoseok, who showed me that love isn't loud, it's steady. Jimin, who always said, don't let fear make your heart smaller. And Jungkook, who told me once during a late night talk, Hyung, love like you sing, don't overthink it, just feel it. Their words came back to me like echoes of truth. Maybe my mom wasn't wrong. Maybe she just wanted to make sure I knew how to be a man off the stage, not just on it. When I went back inside, my mom was cleaning the dishes. I walked up to her quietly and said, Mom, I know why you asked that, but I want you to know I won't make her stay through fear. I'll make her stay through peace. She turned to look at me, eyes full of tears, but smiling the way only mothers do when they realize their child has grown. She didn't say a word. She didn't need to. That night, I learned that sometimes love starts with a question, one that shakes you, one that makes you angry, but also one that opens your eyes. And for the first time in a long time, I felt grateful for every uncomfortable truth that brought me closer to understanding what it means to love fully, honestly, and humanly. The next morning felt different. The house was quiet but not heavy, more like the air after a storm has passed. You can still smell the rain, but the sky begins to clear. My mom was sitting at the kitchen table, sipping her coffee, and my fiancé was helping her prepare breakfast. It looked like nothing happened the night before, but I knew both of them were thinking about the same thing. I watched from the doorway for a while. My mom was asking her little questions about her job, her favorite foods, her family, and my fiancé answered softly, kindly, with the same grace she had shown last night. Every word between them was small, but every glance carried meaning. My mom wasn't just listening, she was studying her, not as an outsider, but as someone trying to understand the person who would soon share her son's life. When my mom noticed me standing there, she smiled. That simple smile, it wasn't forced, it wasn't defensive, it was warm, real. I smiled back, realizing that sometimes understanding doesn't come through big conversations or apologies. Sometimes it comes through silence, through watching someone love the person you love. After breakfast, my dad called me to the backyard. He's a quiet man, not someone who says much, but when he does, it always stays with you. He asked, do you know why your mom asked that question? I sighed. Because she doesn't trust me yet? He shook his head. No, Taehyung. It's because she knows how much of you belongs to the world. Those words hit harder than I expected. He continued, your mom just wants to know that there's a part of you left for home, for yourself, for her, for the woman you'll build your life with. You've given so much to the world, son, don't forget to give something to yourself too. I didn't know what to say. My dad never says things like that. But that morning, he did. And I think that's when I understood the real meaning of what family is. It's not control, it's protection expressed in the only language they know. Later that day, as my fiancée and I were driving back to Seoul, she turned to me and asked, Did I do something wrong? I shook my head and said, No, you did everything right. It's just my family loves deeply, but sometimes they love in ways that hurt before they heal. She nodded and said something that stayed with me ever since. Then I learned how to love them too. That moment, those quiet words felt like the start of something bigger than us. Love isn't just between two people. It's between families, between histories, between all the pieces of you that collide when two lives start to merge. When we got home, I sat down and opened my journal, something I haven't done in years. I wrote, Love is not just about who stays beside you, but about who stays kind, even when it's hard. I thought about all the times I had mistaken love for intensity, for the rush of feelings, the dramatic gestures, the promises under city lights. But the more I grow, the more I realize that love is quieter than that. It's patience, it's showing up, it's holding hands after an uncomfortable conversation. It's doing the dishes together after your world has cracked a little. A few days later, my mom texted me. It was short, just one sentence. She's strong. She reminds me of you. I smiled when I read that. It wasn't an apology, but it was something better acceptance. Since then, I've started to notice how my mom watches my fiancé differently. There's warmth now, not suspicion. There's curiosity instead of judgment. And I think she sees what I see, that love isn't a threat to my dreams, it's what keeps me grounded in them. When I told my brothers, the members, about what happened, they laughed, but they also understood. Jin said, Every mom tests your girlfriend at least once. It's her way of protecting her son. Yoongi added, Yeah, and also her way of checking if you've finally grown up. Hoseok smiled and said, sometimes love begins after a misunderstanding. And Jungkook just said, Hyung, moms are the toughest interviewers. You both passed. We all laughed, but deep down, I knew how right they were. That night, I thought about how much I've changed, not just as an artist, but as a man. There was a time I would have let anger take over. I would have raised my voice, defended my pride, and walked away thinking I was right. But now, I see that peace doesn't come from winning arguments. It comes from understanding why the argument exists at all. Love, real love, isn't just romantic. It's layered, complicated, human. It's about learning to meet people where they are, not where you wish they'd be. And my mom, she just wanted to make sure the woman I love knows how to meet me there too. That's something I'll carry with me for the rest of my life. When you love someone, you're not just writing a new story. You're also healing the old ones, the fears, the patterns, the lessons passed down through generations. So, yes, my mom's question shocked everyone that night. It made me angry, embarrassed, confused, but now I see it for what it really was, a mother's way of saying, Son, I just want to know you'll be loved the way I tried to love you. And that changes everything. After that weekend, something inside me shifted. It wasn't dramatic, no sudden revelation, no tears or big speeches. It was more like a quiet click, the sound of something finally falling into place. For the first time, I understood that love doesn't only grow in harmony, it also grows in friction, in the moments that make you uncomfortable but wiser. Back in Seoul, life returned to its rhythm. Studio sessions, photo shoots, endless rehearsals, the world moved fast again. But even in the chaos, My mom's question lingered in the back of my mind like a melody I couldn't stop humming. Sometimes, late at night, I would look over at my fiancée sleeping beside me and think about how easily love can be taken for granted when you're always chasing perfection. Fame makes everything look glossy, but it doesn't protect you from the loneliness that hides behind applause. I used to think that being loved by millions would fill every void inside me, but it doesn't. What really fills you are the quiet, unseen moments. The text from your mom asking if you've eaten, the smile from someone who's proud of you for reasons the world will never understand, the hand that reaches for yours when the cameras are off. One night, I came home late after filming. It was past midnight. The lights were off, but she was still awake sitting on the couch, reading a letter. When I walked in, she folded it gently and smiled. "Who's that from?" I asked. She said, "Your mom." I froze for a second. My mom never writes letters, not even to me. She handed it to me. The handwriting was shaky, the ink slightly smudged. I read, "Dear daughter, I know our first dinner wasn't easy. I can be too direct sometimes, but I needed to know who you are, not because I doubt you, but because I needed to see if you truly see him. My son gives so much of himself away. He gives to music, to fans, to everyone who asks. I just wanted to be sure someone would give back to him, not because of who he is, but because of who he forgets to be. Thank you for understanding him when even I struggle to." Mom, by the time I finished reading, I couldn't speak. My fiancé looked at me and said softly, "She loves you more than she knows how to say." That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about how often we mistake love for control when sometimes love is just fear wearing armor. My mom's question that night wasn't meant to hurt me. It was her way of saying, "Don't lose yourself in the noise, son." The next morning, I called her. I didn't plan what to say. I just wanted to hear her voice. When she picked up, she sounded surprised. "Taehyung, is everything okay?" I laughed a little. "Yeah, everything's more than okay." There was a pause. Then I said, "Mom, thank you for loving me even when I didn't understand it." She didn't respond right away. I could hear her breathe steady and full. Then she said, "You're my son. You'll always be the part of me that dreams louder than I ever could. I just want to make sure you're still grounded when you wake up." Her words felt like sunlight breaking through a curtain. After that call, I started to see my mom differently. She wasn't the strict, distant woman I remembered from my youth. She was just a mother who had to learn how to share her son with the world. Sometimes I think the hardest part of growing up isn't leaving home, it's realizing how much your parents sacrificed so you could. As the weeks passed, my relationship with my fiancée grew even stronger. She began visiting my family more often. I'd see my mom teaching her old recipes or my dad showing her how to care for the small garden in the backyard. They would laugh together like the tension had never existed. One afternoon, my mom sent me a photo. It was of her and my fiancé cooking together. The caption just said, "She learns fast." It made me laugh and maybe tear up a little. That was the moment I realized that love between people doesn't just connect hearts, it connects generations. It rewrites old fears into new hopes. Music taught me about emotion, but love taught me about meaning. On stage, I can make thousands of people feel something for 3 minutes. But in life, it takes a lifetime to make one person feel truly safe with you. And maybe that's what I've been searching for all along, not perfection, not approval, not applause, just peace. Peace in knowing that the people I love don't need me to be flawless, they just need me to be honest. Sometimes, before I fall asleep, I think about that question again. If Taehyung ever chooses his music over you, will you still stay? And now I understand what my fiancée's silence meant that night. She didn't need to answer because her answer was already there in her patience, her presence, her faith in me. The truth is, she doesn't want to compete with my music. She just wants to be the quiet melody that keeps me human. Maybe that's what love really is, not something that demands attention, but something that stays steady beneath the noise. My mom once feared that my passion would steal me away. Now she sees that it's the very thing that taught me how to love deeply, vulnerably, without condition. I think about all the people out there who might be going through something similar, torn between their dreams and the people they love. If you are, I want you to know this. You don't have to choose. You just have to learn how to carry both with care. Because love, like art, isn't about balance, it's about rhythm, finding the beat between giving and receiving, between chasing and resting, between being seen and being known. And if you can find someone who understands that rhythm with you, then you've already found something rare. Time has this strange way of softening everything. What once felt like a wound now feels like a lesson. And what once felt like conflict now feels like clarity. Months passed since that dinner the night my mom asked the question that changed everything. Our wedding was getting closer, and in between rehearsals, I'd find myself daydreaming about what life would be like after the vows, after the noise, after the spotlight. For the first time in my adult life, I wasn't just chasing, I was preparing for something that required a different kind of devotion. Music taught me discipline, but love was teaching me patience. Music demanded perfection, but love demanded presence. One evening, after a long recording session, I sat alone in the studio, listening to the playback of a song I had written recently. It wasn't meant for an album, just something private, something for her. The melody was simple but honest. The lyrics said everything I couldn't in words. That I was scared, that I was grateful, that I was still learning how to love without losing myself. When I finished listening, I felt this strange peace, like I had finally found the language I'd been searching for all along. Not the language of fame or performance, but of sincerity. I realized then that my mom's question wasn't meant to divide my life into choices, it was meant to remind me to integrate them, to be both a man of music and a man of heart. That night, I called my mom again. I told her I was writing vows for the wedding and asked if she had any advice. She laughed softly and said, "You've written 1,000 songs, Taehyung. Just write one more, but this time make it about truth." I remember sitting there, smiling, letting her words sink in, because truth, that was the hardest thing to write about. It's not as pretty as poetry, not as perfect as melody. Truth is raw, uneven, and sometimes it hurts, but it's the only thing that lasts. The next day, I met my fiancé at a small park near the river. We sat under the same tree we always did when we needed to talk away from the cameras, away from noise, just two people trying to understand life together. She asked me, "What are you writing for your vows?" I looked at her and said, "I'm not sure yet, but I think it'll start with gratitude." She smiled and leaned her head on my shoulder. "Then it's already perfect." We sat there for a while, watching the water move slowly, carrying the reflection of the city lights. And I thought maybe love is a lot like that river. It doesn't rush, it just keeps going. It bends, it shifts, but it always finds a way forward. A week later, my mom called me again. She said, "I want to help with the wedding." I almost dropped my phone. My mom had never been the type to get involved in big events. She's shy, quiet, the kind who loves from the background. But this time, she wanted to help plan, decorate, choose flowers. When I asked why, she said, "Because this time I'm not losing my son. I'm gaining another daughter." I don't think she realized how much that meant to me. On the day we went to the venue together, she walked arm in arm with my fiancé, talking, laughing, like they'd known each other for years. I stood behind them, just watching, letting myself absorb the sight. There was no tension anymore, no questions, no fear, just two women who loved the same person in different ways, finally meeting in the middle. Later that night, I sat on my balcony, the air cool against my face. I thought about all the versions of myself. I've been the dreamer, the performer, the son, the man who was once afraid to be loved completely. I thought about how love doesn't erase who you were, it refines you, smooths the edges, teaches you how to stay gentle even when life gets loud. And maybe that's what maturity really is, not becoming perfect, but becoming softer, more open, more real. The next morning, I woke up early and started writing again. Not a song this time, but something between a letter and a prayer. It went like this: "If one day I forget to call, remind me with kindness, not anger. If one day I get lost in the noise, pull me back gently, not with blame. If one day the world loves me too much, remind me that love isn't measured by applause. And when I fail, because I will hold my hand and tell me that I'm still enough." That became the foundation of my vows. When I showed them to my mom, she smiled through tears and said, "That's what I was trying to ask her that night, Taehyung. That's what I needed to know." It hit me, the question that once made me so angry, so confused, was never really about my fiancé. It was always about me, about whether I was ready to live the love I kept singing about. Now, I see that moment not as a conflict, but as a beginning, the beginning of a deeper understanding between all of us. My mom found peace in seeing me happy. My fiancé found acceptance, and I found balance, the kind that doesn't come from control, but from trust. Before I went to sleep that night, I whispered to myself, "I'm not choosing between music and love anymore. I'm choosing to live in harmony." Because life, real life, isn't about picking one melody, it's about learning how to let every note belong. The morning of my wedding felt unreal. The world outside was quiet, but inside me everything was loud. My heartbeat, my thoughts, the weight of the moment. It was like all the versions of myself had gathered together for one final rehearsal before stepping into a new life. As I looked into the mirror, adjusting my tie, I thought of all the days that had led to this one, the endless flights, the sleepless nights, the songs born from heartbreak, and the silence that often followed after the crowds were gone. I lived so many lives under one name, but today I wasn't Taehyung the artist. I was just Taehyung, a man getting ready to marry the woman who saw me before the spotlight ever did. I remember closing my eyes for a moment and whispering to myself, "Don't rush, feel it all." My mom knocked softly on the door before stepping in. She looked radiant not because of her dress, but because of her peace. The same woman who once doubted my choice was now the calmest person in the room. She smiled and said, "You look nervous?" I laughed, "I am." Then she walked over, fixed my collar, and whispered, "That's how I felt the day I married your father." We both laughed, but then she paused and said something that stayed with me. "Love isn't about being sure, Taehyung. It's about being willing." Those words, simple, soft, but filled with years of wisdom, landed deep. Because she was right. Love isn't certainty, it's choosing every day, even when things aren't perfect. When it was time to walk out, the world slowed down. The music started, and I could hear the soft hum of the guests turning their heads. My friends were there, my bandmates, people I hadn't seen in years. But all I saw was her standing at the end of the aisle, glowing in a way that made time disappear. As she walked closer, I noticed something. My mom was crying. But this time, it wasn't from fear or disappointment. It was from pride. She finally understood that love wasn't taking her son away, it was giving him back to the world fuller, wiser, happier. When my fiancé reached me, we both laughed nervously. Our hands trembled as we held each other's, but the moment we looked into each other's eyes, everything stilled. It felt like home. The officiant began to speak, but honestly, I barely heard him. All I could think about was how much had changed since that dinner the night my mom asked that question. The one that once made me furious now made me grateful. Because without that moment, none of this peace would have existed. When it was time for my vows, my hands shook as I unfolded the paper. I looked up, meeting her eyes, and began to read. I used to think love was about grand gestures, the songs, the words, the endless promises. But now I know it's about the quiet things. The way you wait for me after long nights, the way you never ask me to be someone I'm not, the way you remind me that being loved doesn't mean being perfect. I promise to choose you, not just today, but every day, even when the world changes, even when I change. And when the noise gets too loud, I promise to always find my way back to you. I glanced at my mom while reading, and she smiled that kind of smile that tells you, I understand now. Then my fiancée began her vows. Her voice trembled at first, but she found her rhythm quickly. I don't love you because you're Taehyung from the stage. I love you because you're Taehyung, who forgets to eat when he's writing, who hums melodies in his sleep, who looks at the world like it's still something worth believing in. I promise to be your home when the world feels too heavy. By the time she finished, everyone, even my bandmates, had tears in their eyes. The air felt charged, like music itself was listening. After we exchanged rings, the officiant said the words that officially bound us together. And in that moment, I heard clapping, cheering, laughter, but I also heard something softer, the quiet sigh of my mom's relief. Later, at the reception, my mom took the mic. Nobody expected her to speak. She looked at the crowd, smiled shyly, and said, I used to think I needed to protect my son from pain. But I realize now that love isn't something to protect him from, it's something to let him grow through. And today, I'm not just watching my son get married. I'm watching him become whole. That moment broke me. I walked up to her, hugged her tight, and whispered, Thank you for asking that question that night. She chuckled softly. I knew you'd understand one day. The rest of the night was filled with laughter, dancing, and the kind of happiness that doesn't need to be captured on camera. It just lives quietly, deeply. As the night ended and the guests started leaving, I stood outside the venue looking up at the stars. My wife came beside me, resting her head on my shoulder. She asked, What are you thinking about? I said, How strange life is. How something that started with anger ended with so much peace. She smiled. Maybe that's what love does. It turns storms into songs. I looked at her, the woman who chose to walk beside me through the chaos, the music, the silence, and I whispered, Then I guess this one's my favorite song. That night, before we left, I saw my mom standing by the door, watching us with the same soft smile she had when I was a kid. I waved at her, and she mouthed something I'll never forget. Be happy, my son, and I am. Because now I understand love isn't about choosing between people or dreams. It's about learning how to make them coexist, how to let them dance together imperfectly but beautifully. It took one question, one moment of shock, one night of tears to teach me that the greatest harmony isn't in the music I make, it's in the love I live. Marriage changed me in ways I didn't expect. It wasn't loud or dramatic, it was quiet, like a slow dawn. The kind of change that happens in the small, ordinary moments. Making coffee together, arguing about whose turn it is to do laundry, falling asleep mid conversation. After the wedding, life felt both the same and completely different. The world still expected me to be Taehyung, the performer, the idol, the man who seemed to belong to everyone. But at home, I was just a husband, a son, a man who still burned toast every morning. And somehow, that balance felt right. One of the first things I did after coming back from our short honeymoon was visit my mom. When she opened the door, she looked at me and said, You look lighter. I smiled, maybe because I finally stopped trying to carry everything alone. We spent that afternoon cooking together, laughing, talking about nothing and everything. There was no awkwardness, no distance, just peace. For the first time, I noticed how time had softened her too. She wasn't the same mother who had questioned my decisions, nor was I the same son who had reacted with anger. We had both learned that love sometimes comes wrapped in misunderstanding. That night, as we washed the dishes together, she said, You know, I used to worry that you were always chasing something music, perfection, meaning. But when I saw you that day, standing there with her, I realized you finally stopped running. I looked at her and said softly, I didn't stop, Mom. I just found somewhere to rest. She smiled, and for the first time in a long while, I saw her eyes shimmer not from sadness, but from relief.